Okay guys, so we are going to start with the topic of transport of substance through cell membrane. This is particularly known as chapter number 4 in the physiology book of Guyton and Halls. And the first thing that I am going to discuss over here is the lipid barrier of the cell membrane and the cell membrane transport protein. As we all know that the basic membrane, the basic structure of membrane is made up of phospholipid, and that phospholipid forms a barrier between the fluid present inside the cell and the fluid present outside the cell. So whenever you're talking about the fluid present outside the cell, which is called the extracellular fluid, it has a different composition of ions, minerals. Especially when we are talking about the extracellular fluid, we have got sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride, phosphate, bicarbs, sulfates, glucose, amino acids, even cholesterol, phospholipid, neutral fat, and we have got a variation in the partial pressure of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and the pH value. I'll just show you up that how they are organized in this particular pattern. Okay, look over here. I have represented a membrane which is showing you the inside of the cell and which is showing you the outside of the cell. And as you all know that the outside of the cell is actually made up of extracellular fluid, and the inner side of the cell is made up of cytoplasm. Okay, so now we are going to focus upon the components that are present inside and outside of the cell. Let's start marking out the components. So guys, just have a look at it, that when we have got sodium ion present inside and outside of the cell, we have a variation in their concentration. What unit we are going to calculate over here? I know that this is the beginning of the physiology. You are going to discuss physiology for the first time, or you as even this is my first recorded lecture for physiology, so I must understand that at beginner's level we have always studied about, in our previous biology classes we have studied about that there are sodium and potassium ion present both inside and outside, but they usually vary a lot in their concentration. So I'm just going to mark about their concentration, that how they are present. So when you are talking about, let's just say that when you are talking about the sodium ion present outside, it is 142 milli equivalent. Okay, so I'll be suggesting the unit because it's going to be the same for the ions from the sodium till sulfate. So it's milli equivalent per liter. It's 142 milli equivalent per liter. Over here in the potassium, when you're talking about potassium is 4 milli equivalent per liter. The calcium ion is actually 2.4 milli equivalent per liter, and the magnesium is actually 1.2 milli equivalent. Remember this, that I am talking about ECF fluid. I'm talking about the fluid that is present outside the cell. This will and this must vary when we are going to talk about the intracellular fluid. Okay, so yeah, HCO3 bicarbonate present outside the cell, present in the ECF, it's 28 milli equivalent per unit, and the phosphate ions are 4 milli equivalent per unit, and the sulfate ions are in a very minute quantity, that is 1 milli equivalent per unit. So you must be thinking about, do we need to remember all of these? Yeah, you will eventually going to learn this when you will be studying your medicine and when you will be having reports in your hand to vary. Yeah, there are the values present obviously with each and every report, each and every biochemistry report. There are the normal range of values present over there, but yeah, you must be having an idea. I'm not saying that you have to learn it by heart now or today, but yeah, eventually you will be doing this on your own, inshallah. So here you're having the other thing for the intracellular fluid. When you're talking about the sodium ions, they are present again in milli equivalent per liter. 10 milliequivalent per liter for sodium and 140 milliequivalent per liter for potassium. So guys, remember this, that the sodium is present more outside the cell. The sodium is I must just highlight this value, the sodium is more outside the cell and the potassium is more inside the cell. Okay, there are ranges, like the potassium must be keep in a particular range, otherwise clinically it's a very bad sign. If the potassium is either dropping down, that is hypokalemia, or it is either increasing, that is hyperkalemia. Both are very dangerous. The calcium is not present inside the cell. I must say it's almost negligible, because it's 0.0001 milliequivalent per liter inside the cell. Because if the calcium is present inside the cell, it may cause lysis of the membrane of many organelles and many vacuoles that may lead towards cell death. Yeah, calcium is high when there is you may say when there is cellular death process going on, or when there is muscle contraction going on. Okay, then the level of calciums are high, but they are at certain specific spaces in the cell, not in the whole cytoplasm or not in the intracellular fluid. I must mark this thing over here. It's intracellular fluid. Okay guys, now we have got magnesium over here, and magnesium, which was in minute quantity outside the cell, it is slightly elevated inside the cell. It is 58 milliequivalent per liter. And then when you're going to talk about the bicarbs are present outside the cell in more quantity. Okay, so bicarbs are present more outside and they are less inside. So I must say that bicarbs are 10 milliequivalent per unit. I'm just believing that I have missed the chloride ion over here. I'll mention it later on. Just don't worry about the chloride ion. I'll mention the chloride ion. And when you're talking about the phosphates, so the phosphates are which were present 4 milliequivalent per unit in ECF, they are very much elevated over here, as they are 75 milliequivalent per unit inside. And when you're talking about the sulfate, it is 2 milliequivalent, not very much elevated, but yeah, it is 2 milliequivalent inside the cell. Let's just talk about the chloride ion. Let me just place the chloride ion over here, and this chloride ion is actually 103 milliequivalent outside, whereas when you are talking about chloride ion inside the cell, it is 4 milliequivalent per liter. Now guys, we have got some of the units that are not calculated. I must say that are not calculated. In the milliequivalent unitary measurement, or you can say in the milliequivalent, they are rather calculated as milligram per deciliter. So I must just change the value over here, the unit, sorry, not the value, milligram per deciliter. I'm like very confused that this is going to be my first ever recorded video lecture for physiology. And yeah, inshallah, if it's going to show a good response from you guys, I'll be uploading more videos like this. So let's talk about the glucose thing. When you're talking about glucose is 90 milligram per deciliter, and the amino acid is 30 milligram per deciliter outside the cell, whereas inside the cell the glucose value varies very much from 0 to 20 because of the cellular respiration, and amino acids are nearly 2